the best I've made it this month. Sun is up, the drinks are hot, and now it's time for our first cup. Today, the end of men. This episode is part of a series on men's health and men's mental health awareness. Can't believe it, it's already the end of June, which means that we are rounding into the end of the month of awareness. But as I was telling somebody else, awareness is a costume, right? It's great for getting attention, but action is plain clothes a lot of the time, right? And action is what is really important to move progress ahead. So today, I'm going to give 3 tips for people to take action in service of their own health and in service of others, men's health and mental health as well. And conveniently, the 3 tips that I'm pulling together were explored more in depth in the 3 episodes prior to this one. So you check that out. I'll put a link down below. That said, let's get right into it. Tip number 1, check your biases about men, masculinity, men's health, men's mental health. Check your biases. Before we can move things in terms of policy, before we can move things in terms of priority for men's health and men's mental health, we have to be willing to humanize men and their health and their mental health in ways that we do not do broadly, culturally, in the United States today. In the first episode this month, I did a little exercise with y'all, where I had you close your eyes and I told you I was going to say a word. And then when I said that word, you should say the first word that comes to mind out loud. So close your eyes. You can do it now. The word is masculinity. Now, if you open your eyes and you found yourself saying toxic, don't worry. A lot of people do. And if you don't say it first, it's usually within the first 3 words. And when I say that we need to humanize men's health and men's mental health, we need to understand that that very same thing that you just experienced happens in a lot of people. It happens in women, it happens in men, it happens in adolescents. And it's really hard to humanize something that we have been taught to call toxic. So in that regard, anytime you see toxic masculinity, anytime you start thinking about it, even if it's in a place where it's appropriate, challenge yourself to find a good example of tonic masculinity, of healthy masculinity. I mean, if nothing else, go and watch an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. But you have to challenge what's inside you. You have to challenge that bias. You have to challenge that belief. Tip number 2, something to take action for and towards. This one's especially for the men out there who can hear this message. You need to have a meaning beyond what you produce. You need to have a meaning beyond what you're told you should provide. Too often, way too often, men get shoehorned into this role where they're told that the only value that they have is by being productive or being a provider. And whether you're providing for a family or providing for your company or providing for your career, ultimately, all of those things, while they can be fulfilling in a way, ultimately all of those things don't provide for the most important part of the equation, and that important part of the equation is you, good sir. There's a quote that I've seen that I'm going to butcher somewhere, but is your family going to remember the time that you spent those extra moments on spreadsheets? Well, if not, spend more time with them. perfectly good sentiment. But also, do you want to have your best memories being of spreadsheets, or do you want to have your best memories of exploring your world, exploring hobbies, exploring interests, exploring things beyond that spreadsheet, beyond provision of value to other people, and finding value in yourself and what you do? All of this was explored in an episode earlier this month called Afraid to Die. And the crux of that episode, uh, where my father asked me, why my generation was so afraid to die, my ultimate response was, it's not that I'm afraid to die. It's that I want to live. It's that I want to live as healthily and happily as I can. And we don't often reinforce the difference between avoiding death and wanting to live to the fullest, right? Because with men, it's essentially go to work for 60 years and then you're dead. That's not what it has to be. That's not what it should be. It can be more. It must be more. Because again, it's part of the humanization thing. If all men allow themselves to be are mindless automatons working for someone else's benefit, that's not humanizing yourself. It may be noble in some ways, it may be fantastic and powerful in a lot of ways, but it is not humanizing. And we must allow ourselves to be more than robots. We must find things to live for beyond what we produce and what we provide. Third tip, tell your story. In the credits of every episode this month, there's been a dedication to three men, Jans, Hugh, and Craig. These three men are my father, my mother's brother, my uncle, and my father's brother, another uncle. All three of them have died in the last 5 years. Uh, there's been a lot of loss in my family, especially of the men. And as I process their passing, as I grieve them, but also as I find reasons to be joyous about their time on Earth, something sticks out among all the death and the quiet from their end of things. And that is that 99% of their stories died with them. I only have a small fraction of what they were able to pass on, what they told, of what they said, of how they said it. Um, but there's value in everything that they said, right? There's a lot of power in what they said. There's a lot of experience and there's a lot of reality that in each of their cases was really something that made them unique. And let's be clear, none of these guys, as much as I love them, they're not people that are going to be exalted in the history books, tens or hundreds of years from now. They're not master architects or, big time musicians or, massive, engineers with hundreds of patents. They were none of these things. They were my dad, they were my uncles, they were my elders. But more importantly, they were all good men. They weren't what they had provided. They weren't their triumphs. They weren't their tragedies. They weren't their crimes. They weren't their benevolence. They were just good men. And that is enough to say that their stories were worthwhile. And they can't hear me saying that right now, but you can. So I highly encourage all of you, no matter who you are, where you're from, you know, what you've done, where you've been. Like, guys, tell your story. It deserves to be heard. None of us should be judged only by our worst day or our best. And the reality is that most of us are a lot of things in between. And in that in between is the human part of our existence. The part that doesn't get condensed down to a bottom line, the part that doesn't get condensed down to an anecdote or a footnote. It's our humanity. And that humanity is worth lifting up. It's worth talking about or writing down or recording, however you can do it. Do it. Do it to be heard. Do it to be human. So, this is not the end of the conversation by far. In fact, it is. There's no way that this could be the end of the conversation. But I guarantee you that if you start incorporating these things into your life, into your way of thinking, if you start incorporating questioning the biases that you have, if you start finding something to live for beyond your productivity, if you tell your story, if you humanize yourself, if you allow yourself to be human, and if you allow the men in your life to be human, this is not the end of men. It's the beginning of something new and beautiful for us all. But regardless, please remember that no matter what you've heard or what I've said, death comes for us all. A closed mouth never gets fed. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your men. Be well.